Do not fear the coming fire, child. Fear only that your soul is not pure enough to withstand it. I held her gaze until she looked away, her face a mix of professional awe and genuine discomfort. The director yelled cut, and the spell over the extras broke. They started murmuring and stretching, but I remained still. I was Kain, and Kain did not acknowledge such trivialities. Maya Cruz approached me from the side of the bunker set, her simple off-white costume looking authentic in the filtered light. That was incredible, Caleb. I turned my head slowly, assessing her. My voice was low, the cadence practiced over 6 months of isolation. Your faith is a fragile thing, child. It seeks validation in the words of others. She gave a nervous laugh, unsure how to respond to the man who refused to be Caleb Vance. She walked away, unsettled, and I let the silence stretch before I spoke again, my voice carrying across the concrete space. I gave you the words. Do not fear it. She quickened her pace without looking back. The power dynamic was what I needed. I was the artist, the force, and she was the follower. It was the only way to get through the final day of shooting. Later, before the last scene, the director cornered me by the craft services table. He looked tired. How do you do it, Caleb? How do you keep it up without going insane? For a moment, the mask slipped. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing down from my skull. I felt the Ohio accent trying to surface from beneath Kain's sculpted speech. I rubbed my temples, the pressure behind my eyes immense. The truth is a performance, I said, my own voice a stranger's whisper. The most convincing one wins. He nodded, not really understanding, and walked away to rally his crew. I was left alone with my reflection in the dark screen of a monitor. The ascetic face of Kain stared back. I mouthed the words without sound, a prayer only Caleb could hear. Just one more day. Then the world began to end. A strange static filled the air first, making the hairs on my arms stand up. The lights on set flickered once, twice, then steadied. A producer's shout cut through the low activity on set, his voice tight with alarm. He pointed to the west, where the sky had turned into a solid wall of brown earth. A haboob was coming, a monster of dust and wind. He ordered all 50 of us into the bunker set, the one place designed to be sealed. We shuffled inside, the crew complaining about the delay while I retreated to my corner. I sat on a prop cot and opened one of my notebooks, tracing the lines of Kain's philosophy to keep myself centered. I took out my phone. A news headline about my last film's box office failure was still on the screen. I swiped it away and hesitated over the contact photo of my mother, her face frozen in a demanding smile. I shut the phone off. Across the bunker, Maya was trying her own phone, her expression growing more anxious with each failed attempt to get a signal. The wind hit the bunker like a physical blow, a low roar that vibrated through the concrete floor. The lights flickered again, and this time they died completely. We were plunged into an absolute darkness that felt heavy and suffocating. A few people screamed. The last sound was the solid thump of the bunker's magnetic lock losing power, its final charge gone. The door mechanically released with a loud hiss the next morning. Light flooded the space, blinding us. I was the first one to the opening, with Maya right behind me. We stepped out into the Mojave Desert and into a world that was perfectly silent. The bodies were the first thing I registered. The crew members who had been outside were slumped in their chairs or over the steering wheels of production trucks. They looked like they had fallen asleep. A convoy of cars stood motionless on the distant highway, a long metal serpent baked by the sun. The air was clean and still. The silence was so profound it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. It was broken by a single sound that carried for miles, a high, desperate wail from somewhere over the ridge. The cry was cut short, as if a switch had been thrown. The new reality collapsed on top of us. Maya made a small, choked sound and fell to her knees. Her breath came in ragged gasps that turned into a low, continuous moan. She was catatonic, lost in a terror I could feel rising in my own throat. My first instinct was to run, to just be Caleb Vance from Ohio, a scared man who wanted his mother. I wanted to shed Kain's heavy robes and his measured calm. I saw my reflection in the dusty window of a truck, the severe face of a prophet staring back at me. I looked from the reflection to Maya's shattered face, her eyes baiting for an answer from anyone. Caleb had nothing to offer her. Caleb was as broken as she was. But Kain was not. A cold, deliberate calm washed over me. I suppressed the tremor in my hands and made the choice. The performance would not end. I walked to Maya. I did not kneel to comfort her. I stood over her, a figure of authority. "Rise, first witness," I commanded. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with confusion. "The great cleansing is upon us," as I prophesied. The narrative gave her terror a place to go. Her shock morphed into a stunned, desperate belief. The change was immediate and absolute. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the dead air, and let Kain's voice ring out across the silent desert. "It has begun. We needed supplies. Water, food, anything useful. The only source was the production camp, the dead crew." Maya froze at the thought, her body rigid with a horror that threatened to pull her back under. I could not let that happen. Embodying Kain's brutal pragmatism, I forced myself to walk from one body to the next. I took water bottles from their belts, protein bars from their pockets. The act was a violation that scraped at my soul. I nearly broke when I had to pry a GPS from the director's cold, stiff fingers. His eyes were open, staring at the perfect blue sky. I straightened up and turned to Maya, my arms full of the looted supplies. "These are offerings from the departed," I said, my voice steady. "They have given their worldly goods so that we may continue the journey. It is a necessary ritual." She watched me for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. She stood and began to gather things herself, her movements hesitant but obedient. Her actions were guided by my lie. We loaded what we could into one of the production trucks. As I started the engine, the sound was an obscene violation of the silence. We drove away from the set, leaving the tomb behind. Maya looked back one last time, her face pale. She squinted, her brow furrowed. From the top of the bunker, she must have thought she saw a flicker of movement, a figure watching us leave. The man's knuckles were white around the tire iron. He held it with both hands, the metal raised just beside his ear, and the desperation in his eyes was a worse threat than the weapon. Behind him, inside the dark doorway of the gas station, a woman and a boy watched with the same hollow stare. The silence had left them here and scrubbed them clean of everything but fear. I held my hands out, palms open and empty, the way I had rehearsed for a scene that never got filmed. "There is no need for that," I said. My voice was calm, a low resonance I had spent months perfecting. It was Kain's voice, not mine. "You've been given a second chance. We all have." The man flinched at the sound, his gaze darting from me to Maya, who stood a few feet back, her hands clutching the fabric of her white dress. He looked at our clothes, the dusty robes and the simple follower's garment, and confusion warred with his fear. "Stay back," he croaked, his throat dry. "We have nothing." "You have your lives," I answered, taking a slow step forward. He tensed, but did not swing. "You have your family. The world that was is gone. It was washed clean of its noise and its avarice. Now we may build something new." I kept my eyes on him while my mind raced, collecting details. 3 empty plastic jugs sat near the gas pump, a fine red dust coating their insides. The tires on their old sedan were worn bald. They were out of water, and they had been running for a very long time. "You thirst," I said, not as a question but as a statement. "The great cleansing does not give without taking, and it does not take without giving. It has led you here, and it has led us to you." Maya stepped forward and unshouldered her pack. She pulled out one of our water bottles and set it on the cracked asphalt between us. The man's eyes locked onto it. The woman in the doorway took a stumbling step outside. Later, after the tire iron was lowered and names were exchanged, the teenage son found me alone by the pumps. I was checking the gauge on a rusted-out pickup, my back to him, and for a moment the weight of the performance settled on my shoulders. I felt a tremor of pure animal panic, the kind that reminded me I was just a man named Caleb in a dead world. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the character back into place. "I saw what you did," the boy said from behind me. His voice was quiet, observant. I turned slowly. The mask of Kain was back on my face, serene and knowing. "At the pump," he continued, his eyes narrowed with a suspicion that was older than his years. "Before, you looked scared." I did not answer. I simply smiled, a sad and gentle expression that conveyed a burden he could not understand, and I placed a hand on his shoulder before walking back to the others. The family, starved for any kind of meaning, now followed me. My flock had begun. We were 6 people walking east when the scavengers found us. They came in a single truck, its engine a profane roar in the quiet canyon. It blocked the only path forward, and 3 men with rifles got out. Their movements were confident, predatory. They had done this before. The father, the man who had threatened me with a tire iron, started to babble about surrendering, about giving them whatever they wanted. His wife pulled their son close. Maya looked at me, her face pale with terror, but her eyes filled with absolute trust. She expected a miracle. My heart hammered against my ribs. My training took over, a cold detachment that shoved the fear away. I had walked this canyon 3 months ago with the film's director. He had pointed out the unstable rock formations, warning the crew to stay clear. He had called it a perfect natural trap. "To me," I commanded, my voice cutting through the father's panicked pleading. "Now, behind that outcrop." I pointed to a specific cluster of boulders I remembered. My followers scrambled to obey, their faith a shield against their own terror. I grabbed a spare fuel can from our handcart and ran in a low crouch toward the canyon wall, opposite the scavenger's truck. They shouted, raising their rifles, but I was already in the shadows. I poured the gasoline onto a pile of dry brush near the base of the unstable cliff, then struck a match from the survival kit in my pocket. The fire went up with a whoosh. The scavengers fired a few wild shots as I sprinted back. I threw myself behind the rocks with my people just as the heat of the fire caused the shale to crack and pop. A deep groan echoed through the canyon, and then the whole cliff face gave way. The sound was immense, a grinding roar of rock and earth that shook the ground. It lasted only 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When it was over, there was only silence and a huge cloud of settling dust. The truck and the men who drove it were gone, buried under 1,000 tons of rock. My followers looked at me as if I had commanded the mountain to fall. The father was on his knees, weeping. Maya's awe was a physical thing, a light in her eyes that burned brighter than ever. I had performed ruthlessness, and they had seen divinity. The line inside my own head was blurring. I felt a surge of Kain's power, a feeling of absolute control that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Then I looked at the edge of the rock slide, at the place where their truck had been. A piece of the wreckage was visible, a twisted piece of blue metal. Lying next to it, half buried in the rubble, was a child's worn teddy bear. The human cost of my miracle hit me with a silent, sickening blow. The name Hoover Dam became a prayer on our lips. Word of a sanctuary, a place with power and water, had trickled through the wasteland from another group of travelers we passed. It became our haven, the promised land I spoke of in my sermons around the nightly fire. As we drew closer, the desert gave way to paved roads and signs of order. Uniformed scouts on motorcycles found us 10 miles out. They were clean, armed, and professional. They escorted us to the dam, a monument of concrete and steel that felt like a fortress from another age. Inside, the air was cool and filled with a deep, constant vibration from the great machines moving water through the walls. After weeks of oppressive silence, the sheer presence of so much power was a shock. We were processed. They took our belongings, our scavenged tools and patched clothes, and scanned them with devices before returning them. They gave us clean water and food bars that tasted like chalk. It was efficient and cold. I was separated from my followers and taken to an office, a small gray room with a metal desk. A man sat waiting for me. He was thick and powerful, with a square jaw and military-style glasses. He wore a gray jumpsuit with the emblem of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the chest. He introduced himself as Mark Borad. He did not ask who I was. He seemed to already know. He wanted to know my methods, my purpose, the structure of my group's belief system. I answered him with Kain's words, the philosophy I had spent 6 months crafting. I spoke of the cleansing, of the second chance, of the path to the haven. I performed for him the most critical audition of my life. He listened without expression, his face a mask of tired competence. When I finished, he leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "I have no interest in your soul, Mr. Vance," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I'm interested in your script, and I'm going to prove to everyone that it's fiction." They put me in a small room with a cot and a locked door. I did not see Maya or the others for a full day. I waited, pacing the concrete floor, the low vibration of the dam a constant reminder of Borad's power. On the second day, the door opened, and Maya stood there. Her face was clean, but her eyes were red from crying. Her faith was gone. She walked into the room, and the guard closed the door behind her. "He showed me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Borad, he showed me everything." She told me about the geological survey maps of the canyon, public records showing the unstable rock formations. He showed her weather patterns, explaining how a buildup of heat could easily trigger a slide. He had a logical, plausible explanation for everything. It was not a miracle. It was preparation. It was a trick. "It's all from the script, isn't it?" she asked, tears running down her cheeks. "The sermons, the prophecies, the canyon. It's all just lines you memorized." She looked at me, her expression a ruin of betrayal and heartbreak. "You're just an actor." The performance broke. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. I had no response. The character of Kain had no answer for this, and Caleb Vance was too weak to speak. I let out a single, ragged breath, a sound that felt like it came from the bottom of my soul. The entire persona I had worn for months deflated, leaving the shell of a broken man slouched in the chair. I was exposed. Alone, I was just Caleb again, a 42-year-old fraud from Ohio who was good at pretending. My original goal when this all began, to somehow get east and find my mother, felt like a hollow dream from another life. That person, that son, was a ghost. I weighed his faint memory against the faces of my followers, the teenage boy who saw my fear, the old woman who lost her family and found a prophet, Maya, who had believed in me so completely. Caleb Vance could not save them. The truth was a weapon that would shatter the fragile hope that kept them alive. The lie was their only armor. Only Kain could lead them. He was more real to them than I was, and maybe he was more real to me now, too. I looked at my faint reflection in the dark screen of a small monitor on the wall. I saw a tired man with haunted eyes. I was looking at a stranger I used to know. "Goodbye, Caleb," I said quietly to the reflection. The name felt like a foreign word in my mouth. I mourned the loss of myself, and in doing so, I accepted the burden of the character for good. The next morning, 2 guards came for me. They said Borad had assembled everyone in the main turbine hall. They said it was time for my public confession. I was prepared to give it. I was prepared to dismantle the lie and let the pieces fall where they may. I stood and walked toward the door. Maya was standing outside, waiting. She stepped in front of the guards, blocking my path. She looked at me, and I did not see a doe-eyed follower anymore. I saw a determined co-conspirator. Her eyes were clear, her jaw set. She had made a choice. "They need to believe," she said, her voice low and firm, meant only for me. "I can need them to believe. Don't you dare tell them the truth." Her words hit me with the force of a revelation. She was not asking for comfort. She was giving me an order. She was choosing the beautiful, functional lie over the ugly, sterile truth of this place. As the guards motioned for me to move, she stepped aside. My resolve hardened into something new, something shared. We walked down a long, white corridor. The deep sound of the turbines grew louder. One of the guards, a younger man, leaned close as we walked. He whispered, "Don't disappoint them. Some of us need to believe, too." The guard's words lingered in the cold air as we reached 2 massive steel doors. They opened inward, and the deep vibration of the dam intensified, a constant low frequency I could feel in my teeth. Borad stood on a metal catwalk high above the floor, a small figure against the immense scale of the turbine hall. "Bring the prophet to the stage," his voice boomed, the concrete walls catching the sound and turning it into a command from a god. The guards pushed me forward into the cavernous space. Giant, silent generators, painted a dull industrial green, lined the hall like sleeping titans. High above, a few work lamps cast long shadows that stretched and distorted with every movement. My followers were gathered in the center of the vast floor, a small, huddled group of a dozen people looking lost in the empty expanse. They watched me approach, their faces a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The teenage boy was there, along with the family from the gas station and a few others we had found along the way. They were all clean, wearing the simple gray fatigues of the dam, but their eyes were still fixed on me, their prophet in dusty black robes. I was led onto a low metal platform, the same one Borad must have used. It placed me a few feet above everyone else. The guard stepped back, leaving me alone in the sterile light. I saw Maya standing at the front of our small group. She gave me a single, sharp nod, her jaw tight with resolve. It was not a plea for help. It was a transfer of command. She had done her part, and now it was time for me to do mine. Borad's voice echoed again from the catwalk. "You have a choice, Mr. Vance. Your real name is Zarkis Jador. You are an actor. You are preparing for a role in a film called Messiah of Ash. The philosophy you preach is from a script. The events you call miracles are a combination of luck and cheap theatrical tricks. Tell them the truth. Renounce this fantasy. Those with useful skills, those who can accept reality, will be integrated into our community. Those who cling to your fiction will be exiled with you." I looked out at my people. I saw the old woman who had lost her husband and sons, who now recited Kain's sermons as her nightly prayers. I saw the father who had once raised a tire iron to me and now looked to me for salvation. They were not staring at an actor. They were staring at the only source of meaning left in their shattered lives. To strip that from them would be a cruelty worse than exile. It would be a murder of the soul. My old life, my name, my desire to find my way back to Ohio, all of it felt like a story about someone else. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs, and when I spoke, the voice that came out was not mine. It was Kain's voice, full and resonant, amplified by the great hall until it filled every corner. "He offers you a cage of iron and concrete," I proclaimed, extending a hand not toward Borad, but toward the massive, silent machinery around us. "He offers you a full belly and an empty spirit. He is right. This place is not the haven we seek. I never said it was." A murmur went through my followers. Borad was silent on his perch above. "This is the final test," I continued, my voice rising with a conviction born of total sacrifice. "It is the soulless machine, the temptation of sterile safety, meant to sift the true believers from those who would trade purpose for comfort. He offers you function. I offer you a future. He offers you survival. I offer you a reason to live. Reject this gilded cage. Turn from this tomb of logic and follow me back into the sun. We will build the haven ourselves, with our own hands and our own faith." I finished, and for a moment there was only the sound of my words echoing back at me. Then the father fell to his knees and shouted, "We follow Kain." The teenage boy raised a fist and echoed the cry. The others joined in, their voices rising together, a chorus of defiance that was small but powerful in the immense hall. They chose the wasteland with me over the sanctuary without me. I looked up at Borad. He was not angry. He was not defeated. He stared down at me, and across the distance that separated us, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a look of cold, calculating appraisal, the expression of a predator that has just learned a new and interesting fact about its prey. Faced with a unified group that rejected his terms, Borad made the only logical move. He publicly denounced us as delusional fools and ordered our immediate exile. We were escorted back to the main gate, where our handcart and meager supplies were waiting. One of Borad's engineers, a quiet man with grease on his jumpsuit, helped us load our water cans onto the cart, his movements efficient and precise. As we prepared to leave, he placed a hand on the cart to steady it, his fingers lingering for a moment on the wooden underside. We turned and started walking away from the massive concrete wall of the dam. Maya glanced back. The engineer was still watching us. He gave her a brief, almost imperceptible nod before turning and disappearing back inside the gate. She looked at me, a question in her eyes. She did not understand what it meant, but it felt like a warning, a secret passed in plain sight. We had won the war of belief, but I knew Borid had not surrendered. He had simply changed his tactics. We walked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and red behind the distant silhouette of the dam. The weight of my choice, of the identity I had killed, settled on me completely. There was no more performance. There was only the role. We stopped to rest. The teenage boy came and stood beside me, looking out at the vast, empty landscape of rock and sand. "Kain," he asked, his voice full of a quiet trust that was now my permanent burden. "Where are we going now?" I turned to face him. The mask was gone because there was nothing left underneath. The voice that answered was Kain's, but the words were no longer from a script. I pointed east, not toward Ohio, but toward an unknown horizon that promised only hardship and the faintest glimmer of hope. "To the place we were promised," I said. Maya came and stood beside me. She looked at me, then followed my gaze into the deepening twilight. She was my silent partner, the first to know the truth and the first to choose the lie, sharing the weight of the reality we now had to build for everyone else. The camera of my memory pulled back, showing our small group walking into the unforgiving desert. Then it cut away to a dark room inside the dam. Borid sat before a glowing screen, watching a small, blinking light move across a digital map. He took a slow sip of coffee, his face illuminated by the screen, a patient predator watching his unwitting prey begin its long journey.